Well, sometimes the calendar just doesn't work in your favor. I was so hoping to get to do a devotional on Deuteronomy 23, but this Thursday's reading is a chapter earlier, Deuteronomy 22. And so I'm constrained to just go with a plan and do a devotional on that and save 23 for another year. So look forward to that at some point. But in Deuteronomy 22, the book continues in this theme of outlining regulations for the community of Israel. And frankly, it contains some of the more head-scratching instructions. Not because they're extra hard or extra difficult to live out, more just because they seem a bit odd compared to some of the other regulations. A woman must not wear men's clothing, nor a man wear women's clothing. Do not plant two kinds of seed in your vineyard. Do not plow with an ox and a donkey yoked together. Do not wear clothes of wool and linen woven together. If you ask me, there's some very strange regulations here indeed. I mean, there are things that God asks of his people that just intuitively make sense to us. Things like don't murder or don't steal. Things like that, which cause pain and brokenness in the world. I mean, we can more readily understand why exactly God would ask his people to refrain from those kind of actions. But these regulations that I just listed don't make a whole lot of sense if you put it through the same filter. I mean, who gets hurt if two different kinds of seed are planted in the same field? Or what damage is done if you wear a polyester cotton mixed shirt? In fact, being less breathable, you might argue that wearing 100% cotton does more damage to a person. I suppose you could argue that if you plowed with an ox and a donkey together, that might not be fair to the donkey, but that's about as harmful as it gets. In other words, there doesn't seem so much to be any real ethical or moral issues at the heart of these prohibitions, which then begs the question, what else might be going on? I tend to find myself agreeing with Old Testament scholar John Goldengate, who suggests that these unique requirements, which, if you noticed, if you were paying attention, are all about distinction and separateness, these requirements actually serve to remind God's people that they are to be a distinct and separate people. See, instead of just giving the people of Israel the expected kind of laws and requirements that, frankly, weren't all that different from other nations and people around them, he added some things that meant his people had to do life uniquely, differently from everyone else around them. Now, we've discerned that these specific requirements given to God's people all these years ago aren't also requirements that still stand today. I see plenty of Christian women wearing pants, and I don't think God's breaking a sweat. I'm wearing a shirt today made of 65% polyester and 35% viscose, but I don't feel the need to repent right now. Still, while these quirky ancient regulations may not be expectations of us today, the principle behind them absolutely is just as relevant, maybe even more so today. Jesus described his followers as those who live in the world but aren't of the world. In other words, God still calls us to, in some kind of way, be different and unique than those who aren't part of the community of Jesus' followers. The question is, are we? Or is there now very little to distinguish those who follow Jesus from those who don't? I'm not suggesting that we should go back to wearing single fabric clothing in order to stand out, and I don't think God is either. But he does expect that something should be different about us. Something should be unique. Something should make us stand out. So how does your life stack up? Does it look distinct? Different from the way those around you who don't follow Jesus do life? Or would it be hard to find any difference at all? Maybe it would be worth setting aside a few moments today with God to consider that question.